conversation at play. So what I want to do is to have tools of which then you minimize your personal tax, but you also increase the economy. Every single time that you minimize your tax legally, I want you to understand the flip of the coin where you're actually stimulating the economy for so many other people. And that's very important, right? So what is your personal return on the $108,000 you pay? That's the average that our doctors are paying a year. So Sam and I did an analysis of our last 30 clients, and that's the average, $108,000. Over a decade, that's over $1 million in tax you will pay. What if we was to say to you that if you to integrate, we can actually really, and at the end of my presentation, I'm actually going to show you some of the results, some of the doctors coming through with us now, and what the conversation is all about. So this is dangerous when you are addicted to debt and playing a zero-sum game. It is very common to meet a 46-year-old with more than $2 million worth of debt. This is what happens every day. So guys, welcome to case study number 1. I said a moment ago, there are some doctors here that have been around, some doctors that are here that are our clients. Thank you for showing up. There are some doctors here that heard of us through your accountant, right? And everything in between. Once again, thank you for being here. But those of you now that are laying down, I want you to sit up, because what you're going to see now, you're not going to like it, right? You're not going to like it. I want to run by you a real case study that we see day in, day out. So if you have a look here, this is the last slide, and we're trying to lead this conversation in a way that it makes sense and you feel empowered. So I want you to imagine what it is for Sam, right? And I'm going to ask Sam to make some comments in a moment. What it is for Sam when we meet a 46-year-old doctor with $2 million debt. What it happens for us in our heads. I want you now to start taking your own blood pressure when it comes to your financial system. Let's do this together. So this is case studies, right? That we want to give you that you are ready to go. So Sam, I'm going to run the case study. And then after that, I want you to make some comments or some of the conversations you are having with doctors in the background, okay? So here we go. I want you to see a 42-year-old Dr. Matthew showed up, and here is when he did his financial wealth check. He went into the software and he plugged in these numbers. I'm 42 years old, okay? My income's $300,000. My house worth $2.1 million. I have a mortgage of $1 million. Right now, I have a discount rate at 5.3, and this is my monthly repayments. I got around $600,000 accumulated in super shares. Now, I want you to notice that Matthew actually believes he's doing okay. As a matter of fact, he believes he's doing more than okay. He's 42 years of age, great income, but now I want you to see what Sam sees, what Dominic sees, and what I see. Okay, what the team here, what Michael is doing, what the team here is looking at what is possible for us, right? Let's have a look. What is it doing to you? What is your personal debt doing to you? What I want to do now is I want to take everybody to ground zero, to a basic understanding so that we can work this together. I want you to imagine that you have zero debt in your house. You paid it off. And I want you to understand that you went for just an imagination. I want to put everybody together in the same space so we understand how debt works and how come you were addicted to debt and why you were addicted to debt and how it works. So let's go. So imagine your house was paid for and you go, yep, got it. My house is paid for. And you went to the background and what you saw is, you know what? You went to the backyard, that is, and you thought, you know what? I'm going to build a pool. I'm going to build a swimming pool. So you called the builder, you called the architect, and you said, hey, how much is to build a pool here? And the architect said, look, I can get you the pool permit, I can get you the plumbers, I can get you the engineers, the whole thing, build the whole lot for $100,000. At that moment, it's a big number in your visor, $100,000. Then you call your bank manager, you call your broker, right? And then they say to you, oh, yeah, we can borrow $100,000, right? 25 years term at 6%. And you go, okay. So now imagine this, life is happening. You paid your house off. You're in winter now. You want to build a pool. It will be ready in the summer. But now you went down the finance route to see how you're going to fund this pool. So when you went to the bank and you borrow at 6%, the bank said to you the repayments will be $644. Huh. You made up your decision right there and then. I want you to notice everything being equal. You did not pull a calculator. You did not pull your spreadsheet. Everything's a gut feeling. You may have looked at your spouse, if you have one, and said, what do you think? Can we do that? I want you to notice that 90% of the people will make their decision on that number and that number alone. $644. Yes, I can afford it. And off we go. So I want you to understand how debt works. Then I'm going to extrapolate that to the debt on your car, the debt on your house. So I'm just going basic of basics so everybody is in the same page. Please notice 90% of the people you know will make the decision on the $644. I can afford it. Yeah, that is. I can afford it. Let's go. Let's do this, right? In truth is, by the time you pay back all the money to the bank, you will pay back $193,000. That's how much you're going to pay, right? And if I was to give you the graphs, every single one of you, if you have a mortgage between page 14 and page 30 of your mortgage documents, there is the life of the loan. It is the law. They have got to give it to you. But most of us did not read it. When we take a mortgage, we look at the monthly repayments and we say to ourselves, I can afford it. So in so many ways, lending institutions get you to pay attention to the monthly repayments, and that is it. Now we're going to take your understanding a bit deeper, right? Here's our conversation. At the end of the first year, you may pay back, that's the pool. I'm back at the pool. You pay back $7,732. But if you two walk into the bank and say, how much am I good for? How much of my debt have I actually cleared so far? Well, $1,780. 5 years in this game and you paid back $38,000. And if you two walk in and they say, how much am I good for now? Well, $10,000. Well, but I already paid you $38,000. Yeah, I know. And then if you were to be there for 10 years, you paid back $77,000, but you're only good for $23,000. In other words, if you walk into the bank and says, what is going on? I paid you all this money, but if I wanted to clear out my debt right now, I still owe you $77,000. What's going on? Right? Well, that's when the bank manager will tell you is when you took the loan, we're going to charge you the interest component first. So when you look at the graph, you notice that in the beginning, the debt doesn't come down. Because as you're putting in the money into the debt machine, you're paying the interest component first. So the bulk of the money in a calculator from the bank is going towards the interest. When you borrow the money, ladies and gentlemen, you are the risk. So the way that they do the sums is the bulk of the money in the first few years are going towards the interest component, not the principal. What do people do after living in their home for 10 years? They upgrade. They sell their home and they buy a brand new house. Around year 10 is when the calculator inside of the bank changes and you start to pay more towards the principal. What we notice is most people, after living in their own homes for 7 to 10 years, they buy a bigger one. Why? Because they have greater income. And that conversation we had a moment ago, matching your income to your expenses. It is very common for us to see doctors coming in and they're 40th taking the biggest amount of debt that they can afford with no debt reduction strategy. So I want to take this baby home all the way. So 15 years later, 20 years later, 25 years later, you paid back $193,000 for your $100,000. because you pay for principal and interest. Everybody clear? Okay, now I want to ask you the ultimate question. When do you pay for your mortgage? When? Some of you may say to me, Julio, I pay for my mortgage once a fortnight at the end of the month. I don't remember. It's automatic. It goes from that account to that account. Right. I want you to write this down. That's why Dominic is here. That's why Sam is here. I want you to write this down. You pay for your mortgage after tax. So let's do the numbers now. You went out to borrow $100,000 for a swimming pool. Okay. So now you must earn $298,000, pay $104,000 in tax to have $193,000, which is all the money you pay back from the bank, and the only thing you meant to do is to borrow $100,000. Guys, for those of you that are home right now and are watching me from your computer screen, take a photo of this. If you're watching me right now on your phone, if you could just take a screenshot of this. This is a conversation that ought to be at play. Debt is killing you, but you don't, you just see the repayments. And because you make good money, you make your decision on the monthly repayments. And that's all the mathematics you ever do. It's insanity. It is not good enough. So let me just run this again. If you showed up in my life and you have $100,000 worth of debt, I know you're going to pay $193,000 for that $100,000 across 25 years. And to have $193,000 in your pocket, the money in your pockets after tax. So you got to earn 293. Yep. Pay 104 in tax. To pay 193, and all you meant to do is to borrow 100. So I want you to understand what happens to me when Dr. Matthew shows up in my life and he has $1 million worth of debt in his own home. Will you please multiply all those numbers times 10? Debt has got to go. First and foremost, and we're going to teach you a debt reduction strategy today, is going to blow your mind, literally, right? I don't understand why these conversations are not at play. I don't understand how come the medical fraternity do not have these conversations. Like, this should be common knowledge. It isn't. It isn't. Sam, would you be able to make some comments now of how many doctors we see all the time and the incredible amount of debt these guys are carrying?
Thank you very much, Julio. And thank you everyone for chatting with me on the phone calls leading up to the event as well. It's been great to get some insights for everyone in the team to build this presentation to be as effective for what everyone's looking for. But you're absolutely right. I would say for everyone that I sit down with, 80 to 90% are exactly in this situation that you're describing. Highly leveraged, so maybe a $1.7 million on average debt is what I see on a personal mortgage, which has just recently been taken out due to upgrading. Because once the income increases, like you were saying earlier, the expenses come up to match it. And one of those main expenses is mortgages, is we think about what more can I afford now? What monthly repayment can I get? So I see a lot of doctors with a high amount of personal debt, a high amount of inefficiencies, and paying huge amounts of tax.
And the conversations don't go anywhere. So what is for us to meet people in their 40s with this much debt? And when we say to them, what is your debt strategy, your debt reduction strategy? And they go vague. They're looking at us like, what? So the best we see is people pay ahead of schedule, which is good, which is actually really good, but it's not powerful enough. Sam.
The other thing that's scary as well is seeing loan terms stretching out beyond 70, 75 as well. So a doctor in their 40s, 50s has taken out a 30-year mortgage and they're not going to actually pay that off until they're 80 with no real exit strategy in place.
Sam, one of the conversations we're having about Dr. Raj, right, is this, guys, the ATO, APRA, and all the other regulators, when they ask you what is your exit strategy, they're often looking for how much money you got in super to see if at the end of your retiring life, that money can clear the debt in your house. This to us it's like your blood pressure is out of control. So imagine what it is, what Sam just said, the implication of what Sam just said. Doctor shows up, and then what happens this? He says, I want to retire at 60 or 65. Got it. We run the calculators. We give them the access to WealthGo, one of the most sophisticated software with AI, so they can actually know with precision how they're going to land. And then they're going to have to take a chunk of the super to clear the debt in their own home. Yes, they have highly educated people. Life is good because they had good income, but they actually have no positioning in as much as how much asset they own, right? Any other further comments, Sam? So I'll carry on with the presentation. And guys, for all of you, thank you for being here. And if you are enjoying this, please still send the link to any other doctors or friends or family that you know, right? Get them to join in because we're still going to bring incredible content going forward. So Sam, any other comments before I go? Before I carry on? You good?
So I just wanted to say, thank you very much. And I look forward to getting feedback from everyone after the Zoom. But I do need to leave now. So thank you, Julio.
Thank you, man. Thank you, man. Hey, big, great consult. I know you meet with someone at 10. So have a great weekend, brother. All right. I'll see you soon. See you. Bye. So guys, now let me just put some other tables here for you. If you don't have a good accountant, if you don't have a good conversation about your structuring, this is actually the other numbers that you need to look at. These numbers I just gave you at 37 cents in a dollar. And here is if you're paying 45 cents in a dollar. In other words, take another shot at this screen. And all I want to say to you is this: your personal debt has got to go. Everything being equal, this is what happened. You started late in life in earning, then you earned, then you bought your own home, and you're paying a little long. And then 7 years to 10 years inside of that house, this is what happened. You sold that house, and then you bought a bigger one. The moment you did that, this is what happened. You took a brand new loan for the new house, and that brand new loan started at year 0, where you're paying the bulk of it in interest component. Right? So, if the bank is telling you to pay $600 and you can afford to pay $800, pay $800. If the bank is telling you that your mortgage repayment is $3,000 and you can do $4,000, pay ahead of schedule, because every single dollar that you pay ahead of schedule, you're actually paying the principal component. And that calculation is done on a daily basis. So your personal debt has got to go, okay? Now I am going to park the conversation here as far as debt is concerned, right? And I'm going to bring to you some of the thinking of the doctors and lawyers that are our clients and architects that are our clients, and how they think of Australia, how they think of where we are at. And I'm going to go and do some more numbers. Now, I understand numbers are boring for people, but please stay with me. This is it. This is the moment where we get to have the conversations. I just want you to stay with me as we go through the numbers, right? Matthew must earn 2.9 million, pay 1 million in tax to have the 1.9, right? To pay back the bank for his $1 million. What do you think we should do? Now, there's a difference between a good broker and an excellent broker. A good broker, somebody gets you the money. An excellent broker, somebody gets you out of debt fast and designs their strategies. This is what we see day in, day out. This is it all the time. So we show up at 2 million, double this, right? Debt has got to go. Let this sink in. Now, I don't want you to be in despair. I don't want you to be upset, because we're actually going to give you a debt reduction strategy to actually get you out of that. All right? So, fear not, do not get stuck on the debt conversation, but on the solution that is coming up right now. We have developed a software over the last 10 years that is second to none. It's based on AI. You can plug your numbers in and you will know at any given time how your numbers are performing or not. We're even going to give you what we call the burn factor. You will be able to know how much your opportunity cost is, how much you're burning every week. No more not knowing. No more being stuck without understanding what's going on. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift gears, right? And I'm going to go somewhere else now for this conversation so we can actually create an asset base. In other words, become wealthier, minimize our tax, and get rid of debt. I'm going to start integrating now the three arrows. We welcome to Australia. Australia is the vanguard, the best country in the world in which to prosper now. Nothing beats this country. Some people can argue for New Zealand, but look at the size of the economies, right? Let me just go and say this to you. We believe that real estate is a key solution to where we are at in the economic cycle. And I'm not talking about short term here. I'm talking about medium to long term. So let's do this together. This is straight from source, and I want you to be present. Just look around the room and notice that 50% of doctors here are new Australians. Just get really present to what's going on. Australian population will reach 30 million in 11 to 15 years. And if you extrapolate that to the next 20 years or 30 years, what's actually happening is this. We right now have all these new Australians coming in. Why? Because we have $1 trillion worth of debt as a nation. And the best way out of that is to have new, highly competent people that we can tax them. It is as simple as that. And we have been pulling that off since the First World War. So first then we had the Italians come, and then the Greek comes, and then look at what is going on after the Second World War and where we are at now. The strategy, it doesn't matter which government is in. The truth is we have space and we have capacity for growth. Bunches of arguments, left, right, and center. But the point is they are coming. That's straight from source, right? Now, let's have a look at Ken Morrison, Chief Executive of the Property Council of Australia. If you do not know this, you can't make decisions in the way that those that are prospering are going to make the decisions. Let's go. This report clearly shows that between 2025 and 2032, Australia will find itself 163,000 homes short of expected demand. Demand and supply. If there's not enough bananas, the price of bananas will go up. This is an average deficit of 20,000 homes every year until 2032. So if you don't have enough homes, what do you think happens to rent? At a time when housing affordability is front of mind for many Australians, the last thing we can afford is having supply and planning constraints put on further upward pressures on rents and prices. There it is. What's that to do with you? What's that to do with me? Well, we know doctors are coming in here paying $100,000 a year in tax. Could you just perhaps use that tax, nothing else, to start building an asset base underneath you and use all the depreciations of those assets to get rid of your personal debt? Could we do that? I think so. That's the conversation. So check this out. What if I was to tell you that in 1970, I could have bought a house in Sydney for less than 20 grand. So whatever you see tonight, if you see the average home in Australia tonight, 4-bedroom, double look-up garage, around $600,000, $650,000, depending on the city you're buying, that is going to be extremely cheap in 20 to 30 years from now. The conversation is, you are paying for your own home. Who pays for the investment houses? Who pays for that? Right? So guys, here is tracking us now in percentage. Feel free to copy the presentation, to take photos, to get present to what's all about here. Here's the median price value now. And when people say to you that interest rates are going up and properties will fall of value, well, wishful thinking, wishful hoping. See, one of the things that people are not discussing is that 50% of the houses in Australia are paid for. Yeah, you heard me. 50% of the houses that you drive by in any city in Australia, people bought it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and they already paid for. They're done. So what happens now is when you have your personal debt at 3% and then it goes to 6%, boy, that hurts. The repayments, your personal repayments, that hurts. But when you have a different conversation, a different piece of understanding, when other people are paying, what do you think is going to happen to rent if we are running 20,000 houses a year short? Right? So, here it is. This is the real estate market vacancy rates, and there's more people coming. That's just the capital, some of the capital cities. All of it below 2%. And 2% is already stretching the mark. 2% one could argue is normal. Normal is between 2 and 4%. 2 or 4% of the houses should be empty where people are moving out, people moving in, and so on and so forth. But right now, there's simply already not enough houses. Right? So here's the volume of changes and the vacancy rentals, and also what you're seeing, the prices changing in percentages, right? Now, what's going to happen to interest rates going forward? This is what the major banks are telling us. Okay. By the way, the interest rates you see here now, it's what they call the cost of the money for the bank. That's how much the bank will pay for the money. And then it will put in a profit and then sell it to you at a different rate. Right? Now, we really believe that interest rates, there will be one more interest rates going up, one more rise, and then it will stabilize. And then a year from now, a year and a half from now, they'll start to coming down. Rents are going to ramp up. What happens to rents when interest rates go up? Rents, it's an overreaction. So rents will go through the roof, then rates will come down, but rents will not come down. You start looking at the internal rate return on those investments, right? Here's the pricing update from the NAB. Okay, so in other words, yep, we know this. Now, it's interesting enough that we're basically where we were pre-pandemic. The cost of money before the pandemic came and where we are at right now, basically the same, right? What happened though is that we had this conversation where lots and lots of people will believe that it will stay forever cheap interest rates, and then cheap interest rates went through the roof, right? And lots of people caught in that. And then we hope that people are going to have to sell their own homes. They're not going to. Simply what's going to happen is they're going to refinance with the banks. They're going to take 5 years more, 10 years more. They're going to get some other strategies in order to refinance and keep their own home. So there is no crash coming. If you've been following me for a while, you'll notice that I said all these things. When the pandemic hit, I said to people, houses are going to increase in value 20% to 30%. I was wrong. It was actually 40%. Right now, the demand is much greater than supply, and that's going to be the case for the next 10 years. What you to also imagine for me right now is this. Most of us, depends on where we come from, we only have our background as what we think it's going to happen going forward. I would say to you, most people around the world cannot afford to buy their own home. If you and I were in Europe, in Asia, and we were at the train station, at the metro, and a couple came out, and they were dressed really high, they dressed looking good, and you to ask them, hey, do you own or do you rent? We know that throughout Europe, the answer would be we rent. This is going to be here. So what's actually happening in Australia right now is the blocks of land are becoming smaller and smaller. There's an incredible amount of apartments coming through. We do not invest in apartments unless it's something extremely important to that or peculiar about it. Otherwise, we just don't touch it. What I want you to understand now is this. We're going to have buildings owned by funds that the whole entire building is extremely high, extremely good, and yet every single person there is renting. That is already part of our landscape going forward. When people talk about uncertainty and talk about fear and AI and all of that stuff, there is no commentary from any economist, from banking points of view, from any perspective that our unemployment would hit 10%. And if it did hit 10%, 90% of people are going to work. So if you're to look at where we are at right now, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. We need more teachers, we need more nurses, we need more pilots, we need more doctors. It doesn't matter. So what's happening now is that we are really, really looking for people. What's it to do with you? Well, maybe it's time for you to consider that when you bought your own home, you paid for it. And when you invest, here are your partners helping you to pay for it. There's the tenant, okay, that will pay 50% by giving you the rent, right? There's your the taxman that will then allow you to depreciate those houses, right? And then what will happen here is you're going to have your percentage could be 15%. Now, if you pay more than $50,000, $60,000 a year in tax, your percentage diminishes severely because there is more tax deduction we could do. Okay? So what's going to happen now? Okay, what's going to happen going forward, right? What I want to do now is I want to run by you another case study. And I want to give you case studies that you can look at it and go, right, I learned a few things here. And I just want to give you a bit of an insight as to how this whole thing began before we go into Dr. Raj. He's the conversation, right? When I arrived in Australia in 1988, inflation was sitting at 12%. In 1988, there was a huge recession and everybody was afraid for tomorrow. But what actually happened for me is I came from Brazil, where inflation in 1988 was 232%. So when I got here and I asked people, what's the inflation here like? And they said to me 12%. I want you to know that people were afraid for tomorrow. They really were. There's all this uncertainty. But when in Brazil, inflation was 232% and interest rates in Brazil in 1988, when I came to Australia, was 12% per month. So when we talk about numbers and possibilities and opportunities, what I see is people really being misinformed or making decisions in partial understanding. Yes, interest rates may go to 7%. If you are paying for your debt personally at 7% and you thought it was 3%, that will hurt. But when you're talking about investment, when rents are going through the roof, now what I'm going to do, keep integrating. So you arrived and I said to you, perspective is everything. Now, when I arrived in Australia and they told me the interest rates were 12% per annum and in Brazil was 12% per month, I want you to imagine what that did to my head. We need to look at the cost of money and who's paying for it. That makes all the difference in the world. I want to invite you now to come with me into looking at Raj's positioning. And the internal dialogue is happening with himself. Let's do it. Okay? So the missing link is integration, right? You need the ability to integrate investing with debt reduction and tax planning, right? That's why Dominic is here, and Dominic is going to cover the second part of the presentation. It's that integration piece, right? So let's now just do this. Back into the basics, building the assets in order to minimize taxation. Let's do this together now. The more you invest, less tax you pay. The less tax you pay, the more you drive your debt down. The less debt you have, the more you invest. So, Dr. Raj shows up in our lives, okay? He's 55 years of age. His income is $400,000 a year. His income tax is $150. Medicare is $8. Total tax $158. So his net cash flow is $241. I want you to notice the cognitive dissonance now. He really believes that he is on $400,000 a year. If somebody is to ask him, how much money you make a year? 400. That's fine. From a pre-tax position, that's true. But in real terms, money coming into his life is 241. There's a huge dissonance there, right? Let's keep going now. So then he went into the Wealth Goal software. What the beauty of the software is this. It doesn't know that you are you. The software couldn't care less who's putting in the data. It's just going to look for the inefficiencies, like no mercy. We're looking for the inefficiencies to take it out. So now Raj shows up. His house is worth 1.9. He owes $700,000. Now that he has this $700,000, we already know, you know now, what the most important thing to do is to get rid of that $700,000, right? His monthly repayments is $3,888. Home equity is 1.2. Superannuation 458. Now look at this. He has shares of 887,000. The moment that somebody shows up in your life and they have shares and manage funds to the tune of 880 grand, you know this person is getting advice. Nonetheless, the advice is not integrated. It's still hoping for the best. There's no integration. And I want you to come in with me and know this. I want you to be able to sit with your spouse tonight, perhaps over a glass of wine, perhaps over a good dinner, good mineral water. Have a chat about this. Look at this. So at the age of 55, assets minus liabilities, this guy sits at 2.5 million. That's enough. It's good. Not ideal. But then when he says, hi, I want to retire in 14 years, okay, or 250 grand. He's not talking about 250 grand in 14 years. He wants to do is take care of inflation and have the equivalent of 250 in 14 years. So, okay. Numbers have no feelings. So we are now using the software and taking him this picture here called as is. So basically he went into the software, he plugged in his numbers. My question is, how come his accountant's not talking to him about this? Why? Why are people not present? So we'll take now, everything being equal, his home will be worth 3.4 million. The debt in his own house in 14 years will be 51,000. As I said before, he takes the money out of super and pay that off, right? I wish it was paid for long ago, but that is his current reality if it taken forward 14 years, everything being equal, right? So home equity 3.3, superannuation 775, shares 1.7 million, savings 86,000. So now, what we're going to do now is this. We're going to now have a look at his house value, his properties, and so on, and have a look at what happens if he was able to invest. Okay? So now what's actually happens here is this. The software told him today that if he was able to invest, how much would it cost him, and start putting some property underneath his belt. Now let's go forward now and says his net wealth outside of his home, and if he does nothing, is 2.6 million. If he was to invest, what the software simply said to him at this point in time is this. Right now, if you're just to use the tax you're paying, you would be better off by almost $2.5 million by simply putting a couple of property investments underneath your belt now and let it rip for 14 years. I'm now going to show you the tax implication of that and how powerful that reduction that becomes. So this is just a guy showing up, and I'm going to give you the ability to do this for yourself at home. No one will be selling you anything, pushing you anything. You're going to punch your numbers in, and it's simply going to tell you how you're going to land if you do nothing, if you do a little bit, and if you do something every time you can. So that's already 14 years later if he was to act in what his inefficiencies are calling to do now. So now, if we then to say, right, if I was to put a couple of property investments at play, use the deductions to drive my own home, my own debt in my home down, right? And then clear my debt the moment the property is paid for, I start paying the first property investment and so on and so forth. Here is his, just in property investment, he would be $4 million. Julio, how is that possible? Is too much tax being wasted, which we're going to bring it back and use as debt reduction. So you have tax minimization, debt reduction, and the growth in an island where the population is going from 25 million to 30 million in a very short period of time. And then from 30 million to 50 million over the next 30 years. That's what we're talking about. It's integrating all these numbers, right? That is now his next positioning. By simply taking his debt out, minimizing his tax, and using the inefficiencies to build a portfolio. That is the conversation. So, hey guys, some people may say I may be trying to promote myself here. Ain't the case. I wrote this book called Is Your Accountant an Idiot? Please understand that this is a question. It's not a statement. It's not a statement. As a matter of fact, if you open the book, it says this: call your accountant today and say, I love you, forgive me, right? Double my fees. Why? Because the book is about the conversations you're not having. People are way too busy. You should be interested on the outcome of your numbers, no one else. So there's no point in blaming the accountant over there, the financial planner over there, if your conversations are not integrated, right? Many accountants across Australia are using this book to facilitate the conversations to have with their clients about these difference. We're talking about $8 million worth of difference here. How do we get this difference? By taking the inefficiencies out. Same person, right? So this is how it looks in the software. I want you to imagine that the moment you plug into the software, and in a moment, I'm going to give you access to software. You'll be able to ask me a bunch of questions and Dominic a bunch of questions, right, on how this operates. So here's Dr. Raj punching in his numbers into the software, and this is how the graph looks like. And I want you to take this to your accountant. Once this conversation is open and you have access to software, I want you to sit with your accountant or anyone on your advice team and say, let's talk about this. So what we're looking at right now is Dr. Raj taking his life and then saying, I will retire on 250 grand. Well, in 250 grand in 14 years is going to be a lot more than 250 grand. If you were to pull the money from all you have got right now without any planning and you're 55, yep, you're going to run out of money 10 years later. So the couple of things you can do. What? Keep working. Work part-time. Yeah. But there's no such a thing as retiring. Because if you do retire, you run out of money. Got it. Next stage of the software is simple as, Dr. Raj, are you clear that the money that you are burning, okay? The money that you are burning, what actually happens here in this position is this. The money that you're burning buys 3 property investments. You're 55 years of age. You got none. What happened? Yes, you have some shares, but they're not going to deliver you. These are the results of your shares. What happened? Well, the conversations are not at play. You don't understand the island you live in. What if I was to tell you that if I flick one more piece, those 3 properties would be cash flow positive at $52 a week? What? Yeah, you heard me. By the time you put those properties at play, and an accountant like Dominic comes in and does the depreciation, and we actually force the software to tell me who's paying for what. For Dr. Raj, the tenant would pay 71.3% of the houses, and the ATO would pay for the rest, and the houses would go cash flow positive. What the software is doing right now is this. I understand you're conservative. It's cool. Doesn't matter. You don't do 3, do 1. But doing none produces that result. If you were to simply put the money that's going out in tax into play, this becomes possible immediately. So you could consider buying 3 properties. There's no such a thing as investing without risk. What if it doesn't rent? What if interest rates go up? The software will take care of all of it, and you can know what you can do or not do. If you then extrapolate this conversation and simply let the software run, Raj's inefficiency, every single green box you've seen is a property. And the software is already taking care of inflation, rent, deductions, the whole lot. So what actually happens here is you can see that he can have much better conversations with his accountant, his financial planner, in terms of getting ahead. And if you're not having this conversation, something is out. That's my point for Medigrow. So all I want to do in Medigrow is to create, seriously, a bunch of people that know each other, that we have dinner together, we have conferences together, and we create wealthy doctors across Australia where we share the information. There is no longer not knowing. Look at this guy. One guy showing up. This is the result of applying his inefficiencies towards his wealth. What happens to his kids? He can pull equity out of that and help his kids into their own homes. So now, I want you to be very clear on what I'm about to show to you. One house alone. And in a moment, I'm going to give you access to software. Every one of you, right? One house alone. By the time Dominique or an accountant would finish doing the depreciation, would put back onto Raj's pocket $9,740. Now I'm going to integrate this baby. Watch. When you're hoping for the best, that's all you got. But once you have the investments, the analyses are complete. The analysis come in, they are complete. These your applied income, plus the rental income, the deductions, taxable income, it does the whole lot. What actually happens now is we already know he's going to get from the first house $9,740. What should we do with that money? When you know that you're going to get this money back, this is almost like holy money. It makes a different sound in your head. It goes like, oh. If you got $9,740 coming back in and you put straight in your mortgage as part of a strategy, that $9,000 goes into principal, ladies and gentlemen. That $9,000 is going to be performing tonight at 6% tax-free. A dollar saved is way more powerful than a dollar made. Meaning, if you have a strategy that is going to put $7,000 into your mortgage, that's 70 grand over the next 10 years. What happens if he has 3 properties, each of them putting the same amount back into his account? Now you can see that if you structured this right, you minimize your risk by using the tax money you are paying. You're minimizing your risk by using the software to tell you if you can afford it or can't afford it. Can't afford it, don't do it. Can afford it, do it. And then it will give you the tax minimization on the spot, right there and then. You know what's possible for you, right? So then what actually happens here now is this. Raj is going to pick up $29,000, $220, and make $52 per week by having those houses. When we structure this, we make sure that his houses have nothing to do with his own home. It's a firewall in finance. They stand alone. If at any moment something goes wrong, he sells one of them, 2 of them. The point is, it's his inefficiency. I'm not asking him to put more on his money. It's just the money he's already trying out, right? So now the goal is to clear his personal debt. That is the equivalent of $290,000 off his mortgage over the next 10 years by simply being strategic. And by the way, at the interest rates we are right now, you would be getting $52 a week. Even if you had to pay $52 a week, it's an incredible return. So guys, here's the conversation I want you to have with your accountant. Here's the conversation I want you to have with your financial planner. This is why we exist. So Raj shows up in our lives. You see, this is the methodology. The first thing we want to do is to put a circle of protection around his home. If you have equity in your home, pull the equity, buy another house. You know why? Because they're going to let you. But that house has to stand alone. Then you depreciate the bejesus out of that house, use all the depreciation plus the income to drive your own home debt down. So rule number one, get rid of the debt on your own home. Number two, if you have equity, buy another house. Why? Because they're going to let you. If you have equity again, buy another house. So basically, as we drive the debt in his own home down, the moment his personal debt is gone, we start paying the debt on his property investment. Get rid of it. Imagine now that in the next 14 years, because of his inefficiency now being converted into efficiency, we clear his debt. The moment the debt on a property investment on his own home is paid for, we go for the first property investment and then the second. And the moment those houses become cash flow positive, they start buying other assets. If you are not having this kind of conversation with your accountant right now, look, I wrote this book for it. I'll send you a copy for being here today. I just want people to know our endeavor is to create doctors that are financially savvy. That's the idea. So after inflation, his $250,000 will be $389,000. Progressive and compounding tax savings, more investments, less tax, more capacity to eliminate that. Once his own house is paid for, property investment debt is tackled. That by the time he had a few more properties added, he will get back $82,000 from the tax man. Why? Because he has investments. You do not need to wait 10 years to know if this is true. And this is why the AI in the software can give you timelines. And I'm going to go into the timelines and help you to build it. So you don't walk away from here today not knowing. You never, I promise you, you will never again not know. The doctors that we have often say to us, we had another doctor come in and said, I actually do not know where I stand. Can you give me a couple of weeks to get to where am I at? Right? So let me just say to you right now, how much are you missing? So guys, let's do this. I want you to do your own case study right now. All right?